Previously on In Love with Love.
That most, I'm not going to say most, that's not fair. That's not fair. A lot of young black men have like a lot of trauma. And a lot of it, and it's not stuff that's done. There's absolutely trauma that was created through some extremely
Systemic situations.
well, I was going to say through some extreme circumstances that we wouldn't even have to get into, but is there's people who are suffering from very traumatic instances that occurred in their childhood, young adulthood, whatever it is, that either they can't talk about, don't want to talk about, don't necessarily they think it's normal, and then there's other things where it's just a lot of small things, and it comes from I think it comes from the fact that a lot of young black men are manhood is wrapped up in can you fight? Can you essentially not feel pain or like not let people see you feel pain? How many women can you obtain? I've said for years the most dangerous thing that young black men have been taught is that you get social currency by how many women you can get in bed.
Was this also, as you said, you grew up in Pittsburgh in the Bay Area,
Yeah.
90s, right?
Yeah. 80, I'm 80 baby, so you know. Yeah.
So you have the culture of that, like, you have the culture of the music.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? As much as we might, too short.
Yeah.
And all of the, like,
yeah.
you know, pimping
NWA,
it, like, everything was
everything.
very much
Yeah.
about pimping.
Oh yeah.
You know, that's a, people don't talk about it, but that's very much a Bay Area underbelly.
It is.
It's a very big Bay Area underbelly where there's a lot of pimping culture and how that seeps. And it's unfortunate because it started so long ago. I'm talking about we're dealing with people who were dealing with this in the 60s, in the 50s, and sprinkled down into that. And so now you, as a young black man growing up at that time in the 90s, plus the impact of rap music,
Yeah.
how did you break out?
Well, and I'm glad you brought it up mixed in with the question because young men are you're never really chastised for loving mom. So loving mom is a safe space. Like we all can
That's so powerful.
we have accepted that we can crash out over mom.
Yeah.
But saying this is my woman and I'm going to honor her and I'm going to make sure my body belongs to her. I'm going to make sure I do things to make sure she feels protected and all these things that has been looked at as weak. So going back to what you said, I'll continue on, but I think again I think it's good that you asked that because for me I knew it was a safe space loving my mom out loud, so I could tell people mom come first, and she did, which is right at that age, right? But it was also I'm not going to be judged for that,
Yeah.
right? Now I will be judged for loving a woman
Because you look weak.
because that's not so
Yeah.
because the music 90s and I Tanyka knows I can't stand this phrase because I think phrases that are overused a lot bothers me.
Okay.
Right, so when toxic became a word everybody used for everything, as soon as I would hear it, I'd be like oh god, but it does work. 90s rap was toxic
Very.
because it was nothing for us to refer to women as you name the adjectives, right?
B&H.
It was nothing for young men to look at women as a piece of meat.
Yeah.
And I feel a huge amount of sorrow, and I pray for youth now because I think it's even more a problem because of the fact that it's not the music, it's the fact that they can go and watch videos on their phone or their tablet of any type of sexual act that they want to, and they look at women as someone who's strictly there for that.
I think it's even worse that women have accepted it. They've accepted that
I
role and
agree.
they've
I
perpetuated
agree.
it, and now they're like, well, shoes, I'm going to make my money.
Yeah.
So they've also spiritually taken on the role of the predator.
Yeah.
even amongst each other in themselves.
Yeah.
So.
And I think one pivotal thing, if you look at the 80s and 90s, but especially by the 90s, if you really look at it, we are the fatherless children. And the crack, no,
Yes.
you're right about that.
Yes.
Look, I know more than a few crack babies
Yeah.
that are now adults,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
But so the abandonness is, and socially, the way I see things, and you got to deal with me here. I kind of go off, but trust me, it all stays together.
Okay.
One revelation I came to as an adult was, I remember thinking, like, once I kind of got out of a haze of what we all looked at as normal in the 90s and realized this stuff isn't normal. Once I became an adult, and it was like, we have to unlearn these things. And culturally, I looked at it and I'm like, Grandma and Grandpa didn't think like this. Grandma and Grandpa was different. But again, we were all the fatherless children. It was like, oh, wow, if people had a father in the house.
Yeah.
It wasn't a surprise if it was the opposite. And drugs are so prevalent. Pimping culture was so prevalent. Player culture was so prevalent.
Yeah.
We ain't heard the phrase player in so long. That was weird when I said it, right?
Mm-hmm. Not for me. I just watched a documentary.
But the culture of all that was so embedded in us that we were all walking monoliths.
Yeah.
I mean, like, we all felt like we had to dress, talk, and act the same thing. And if you acted outside of that bubble, there was something wrong with you. Yeah. It wasn't, hey, maybe there's something wrong with this bubble that we're in. It was, no, you're going outside. You're coloring outside the lines. So there's something wrong with you, right? Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, I know men in their 40s who still think the same way, and they don't see anything wrong with it. Right. And they're leaving behind the same things that they as children and young people cried about.
And when you said just a moment ago, it hit me in my spirit so hard. The generation, if you will, was the zeitgeist of the time of fatherless children, right? Yeah. Not everybody, but it was a spirit that was there. Oh, yeah. A zeitgeist, if you will. But for you to say, I just heard it, like that spirit of abandonment. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Deeply rooted, like a spirit of abandonment and rejection that spawned narcissism. Yeah. That spawned, I don't care, I'm going to get mine before you get yours. I'm going to get, you're not going to get me, you're not going to hurt me. Like, we're just protecting ourselves in so many ways because we're still hurting. Yeah. And we don't want to be hurt the way that we've been hurt by the mama that was on drugs, by the daddy that was on the drugs, by that, all of the things. And then the music just kept perpetuating and reinforcing that, like you said, to now we're fast forward 45, 46, 47, 48, grown. And I know it's women too, but it's men arrested in a place. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like you said, don't see anything wrong with that because it's a safe place, essentially.
I'm very hard on men. But at the same time, I don't cater to women. Mm-hmm. So it's funny because I've said things in the past about black men, and then people have assumed me for, like, not assumed, they have accused me, rather, of pandering to women. And I'm like, no, I'm very hard on our women, too. Interesting. But the reason I'm harder on the men is because I look at it this way. Think about what you just said. We talked about the fact that men are looking at women like pieces of meat, right? Mm-hmm. And men don't have a thought process of how they're going to go about things. But then you have brought up the fact that women will then say, okay, well, I'm going to get mine. I'm going to use my body. I'm going to use my resources to get what I want, right? And I'm not going to allow them to hurt me. I'm essentially going to have a shield. Now, I think both parties deserve some type of correction. Mm-hmm. But the reason I'm harder on men is because, for the most part, the reason for both is because of men. So go ahead.
And I'm saying this because I cannot think of this woman's song. It's a song in the 70s, super popular. It's been sampled so much. It takes two to make a thing go right. Yeah. And she was like, we got to use what we got to get what we want.
Yeah.
And she was, in the beginning of the intro, she was like, we're not taking no more of the stuff.
Yeah.
We're not doing it no more. Super popular song. I hate not being able to think about it. But that is essentially, granted, I said this was the 70s.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? God, I can't think of it. Anyways, this was the 70s. All of this birthed 20 years later into what you're seeing now. So it didn't come out of nowhere.
No.
You know what I'm saying? I'm still very curious as to how Marshon broke out, but
I'll get to that. I will. I promise.
But what I'm saying also, I built that to say it's always generational. When we look at these issues and these times and stuff like that, it takes usually like, 10, 20 years for us to actually see the effects of some things.
Yeah.
So I don't have any grace for my generation, which is the same generation, but I can understand a little bit more because I grew up in it. You're talking to somebody who, when we talk about pimp culture, I was 15 years old. I had to watch all the movies. Superfly, Dolomite, Willie D, all of Grandpa sat me on the couch, watch all of these because you will not be subject to being on the line.
I
You
own
know what
all
I'm
of them
saying?
right now.
Yeah, I believe it, but I believe it though. That's what I'm saying. So but at that time, and I've talked to her about this too, because unfortunately for me, what it did was harden my heart and my mindset to black men.
Yeah.
And I had to come from a space where the Lord had to heal me to be like, oh, these are still my sons. Yeah. I love them. You can't have that mindset, but I also understand why the women have that mindset when you've seen generations or years and people before you having been abused. So
Exploited. That's the
exploited.
exploitation. Black exploitation.
Exactly. Black exploitation. Exactly. So the power of God and just softening all of it.
Yeah.
Because only he could do it.
So, and I'm going to tell you how. And the moment I stopped looking, let me take a step back real quick. I grew up being taught Black history. Mm-hmm. I grew up, when the first collection of books I had was, I remember my mom ordered me, it was like, I want to say like 35, 40. It was this set. Remember the sets they would have on TV where it'd be like $39.99, da-da-da.
Eyes on the prize and
And
all
it
that.
it was a whole bunch of coloring books. Each coloring book was about a different famous Black person.
Yeah.
Martin Luther King. You name them all, right?
Yep.
And I was taught the history, and at a very young age, and the change for me was when I realized I need to start acting like I'm demanding people who aren't Black to treat me. Let me explain what I mean by that. Is we have fallen into this monolithic view of how we are being perceived by people, and how we sometimes are trapped almost in the twilight zone, right? But then we ask people, why can't you just treat me like a normal person? But then I look and I'm like, well, am I acting like a normal person, or am I stuck in the trauma of what I think I'm supposed to be? In the moment I realized my value as a man has nothing to do with the things that a culture has taught me. First of all, if you ask me, I think a lot of the culture in the last 40 years is trash. It's absolute trash. Once I can remember when we get married, we have our daughter, and I'm trying to still be me, and I'm listening to some of the same music, and I'm like, God, did they cuss this much before?
Mine was renewed.
God, man, is every woman just a B word, and I'm flipping you over and do this and do that? And I got a daughter.
Yeah, right. Your mind was
I got
renewed.
a wife.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing stuff different, and I'm perceiving conversations different. And is God doing a work in me, right?
Yes.
But it was me carrying myself as a son of God, as opposed to, quite honestly, what I thought the character of a Black man was supposed to look like. That's just the reality of it. And I have to say, and there's probably people who's gonna hear that and they're gonna go, what are you trying to say? What I'm saying is this: whether we want to acknowledge it or not, a lot of black men grow up believing they are supposed to be an avatar of what a black man is supposed to be. And that avatar is I get women, I get money, I wear this, I'm the toughest person in the room. You know, this avatar, right? And once I realized that's not a culture I want to be about, and that's not black culture.
No.
That's low poverty culture.
Pivotal moment was when?
When I realized that.
But when did that happen? Was it just after you had your daughter?
It was after we got married.
Okay.
Okay.
Because after we got married, I said to my friends, I'm not going to be really hanging around with y'all. Like, give me like a year. Not because I was going to do something stupid with them or anything like that. It was just because I needed to grow in this.
And what
right?
told you that on the inside?
They weren't living the life I was living.
That you wanted to live, huh?
They were single men or in relationships, but they weren't married, things like that. I knew the moment we said I do, I knew our life was going to be totally different. And the moment we said I do, things started breaking off.
So instead of, because what we're not going to do is call you a black Republican, okay? We're not going to do that. Because some people would try and be like, oh, that's a black Republican kind of mindset. That's absolutely not it. What I hear is...
That is so strange to me.
Yeah, people are weird. I mean, as we just said...
I don't mind if they do.
What I hear is you threw off the identity, and I can think about this because, once again, we come from the same place. I remember very distinctly Black Panther, grew up in a very black household, Black Jesus on the wall, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, all of that kind of stuff. And the Lord was like, your kingdom before you're black.
Yes.
And so I was like, I literally have a tattoo of a black woman on my back. You know what I'm saying? But when he said that, it was like,
you're mine first.
I'm kingdom. That's a whole different, that's not anything of this world. Yeah. So your mindset has to think on things above and not things beneath. Yeah.
But what I love, I do want to say this because what I do love about God is that everything is purposeful. And so I love the fact that, because I've had these conversations, to be honest, about culture and where does it fit and all of those things and being black in your blackness. And like you said, even what we think it is, right? But just the fact that we're born into a culture and we have passions about a culture, because I used to be honest, very passionate about young black ladies. Mm-hmm. And that passion grew and it extended to black men. And someone debated me up and down like, no, you're supposed to be this. And I said, but no. All I know is I have this passion and I have this gift and anointing for this subgroup. Yeah. Not that I'm poo-pooing on anybody else, but I know that God has stirred this passion for me. That's for a specific reason, right?
I think it's also because there was no idolizing of it. And that's when we get into issues, whether it's the music, whether it's the culture that we grew up in, whether it's the nostalgia of things that we grew up in. If there's any idolizing of that, then it's a problem.
This is the thing about that, though. I don't think there's anything, like, I would be lying to you if I told you I'm not drawn to young black men. Yeah. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Now, mind you, I think the biggest distinction is this, is the reason I say black culture is because it's really what people look at as black culture. Yeah. I've said this to people recently where I'm like, look, I didn't break away from black culture. I broke away from what we perceive as black culture. Because to me, black culture is grandma and grandpa. Yeah. I've said that for years. Grandma and grandpa is black culture. Yeah. And I grew up with grandpa saying, what is this you listening to?
Yes.
What? This is garbage. Why you got all these earrings? You a sissy?
That's true.
Why your pants hanging off your butt? Why's your butt out? So that was black culture. Yeah. What we morphed into it was the almost children of the cornish black culture. And because it's been around for 40
Black
years,
children.
that's looked at as black culture. So when I say that, I was breaking away from the idea of what black culture is. I want to get it. I want to make sure people understand this. I love who I am, and if God had me sign a new lease every year, I would. But I'm not trapped into what I am.
Exactly.
Because
Kingdom.
I have said I explained this to somebody recently. I said, look, me being black is the sixth most important thing about me. Still important, but the first most important thing about me is me being a good son to God. Second thing is me being a good husband. Third thing is me being a good father. The fourth thing is me being a provider. The fifth thing is me honoring in totality those things. So what I mean by that is if you're a black man that I care about, right? Even if I don't care about, but I say care about because that's going to give me the opportunity to speak to you, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going to say, do you plan on marrying this girl? Huh? Do you plan on marrying her? Well, I was thinking about it. When? Well, I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? I know you. I know you. Everything you wanted in life, you decided you wanted to get it and you got it. When you marry her? Oh man, you know I'm going to. No, I don't. When? Because you've wasted 3 years of her life. Those are childbearing years. And I'm going to get on you. And I'm saying this because what I'm saying is in that conversation, the idea of two black men supposed to have each other back, I don't care about that. What I care about is in that moment, the respect and honor that's paid towards marriage and family and nuclear family and honoring of a woman and things like that, that takes precedent. So if I have to hurt your feelings or if I have to momentarily or even permanently harm our relationship over it, my respect for marriage is going to come before my respect for a black man. Do you get what I'm saying?
Absolutely. It's,
And-
what
and
you're
that-
telling me is you have a kingdom mindset.
And this the thing is it's so hard to talk about my feelings on culture and who we are and things like that. Because I've said since I was a kid, I should be able to walk into any black neighborhood and be good. Anyone.
I don't think it's hard. I think it's necessary.
And I felt that my whole life, even though I know it's not true. I mean, I know it's not true just because of where I'm from, right? But at the same time, too, people look at me weird because if we're around, let's say we were around a white man who said, I only date white women. I'm not offended by that. Just as much as I'm not offended by a black woman saying I only date black men. But some people are because they look at culture as this defense thing where I don't look at it like that. I look at it as something I'm proud of. I'm proud of my skin color. But I'm more in defense of kingdom within our culture than I am our culture in general. Because when you do that, then you'll defend anything that the culture is doing. Because it's the culture doing it. I'm going to defend kingdom within the culture. Did I answer your question? Probably not.
Yes, it's that, all that and then some, right? And so this has been an amazing conversation. I think we're about to wind down. If you had some last words of wisdom to share, just in the area of just love stories, right? Let's circle back to that, like these, not these cookie cutter love stories, but the love stories that God has graced us with, and still yet to come for some people. What words of wisdom would you share to people?
Okay, so a couple things. It's okay to want to love somebody. It's okay to want to love someone. It's okay to be outward with it. It's okay to be intentional with it. It is not an old school thought to think that someone says at a young age, my idea is to be married, to have kids, in that order. It is not an old school thing to say. Just because people have made it as something that's unattainable or something that is looked at as people of the past did, it is not. It's okay to say, hey, I want to, and it's actually ideal to say, I want to grow with someone as opposed to I want to have a whole bunch of situationships. And I would say this. Let's stop talking about sex like it's a dirty thing. It wasn't designed that way. Okay? This is relationship based, so go with me. She's feeling uncomfortable. I don't teach my kids that sex is a dirty word. I teach my kids that sex is an amazing thing that happens when you're married.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to give them any hang-ups about sex where it's like, if I've taught it always as this dirty, nasty thing, then eventually when they do get married, they look at it as something taboo, as opposed to something that they're supposed to be sharing their body with their spouse.
Perfect timing. I'm just going to say that without getting into a lot more words, because Anja and I were just having this conversation, and I was hoping that we find a place to put it, but we did want to talk about purity culture. So just without going in, because we kind of are winding down, but that's the balance to it, right?
Yeah.
As initially, purity culture was initiated, and people have been talking about this all over the internet, all over the wherever you find podcasts, but the inception of the purity culture had flaws, right? We understood that it was like to say no sex, right? But the balance to God's message about sexual purity is it's beautiful, it's perfect. He created sex in the perfect place, which was ordained in marriage. And so, and so much more to the purity message, of course, the purity of heart, mind, and all of those things. But I'm glad that you brought that up. What words of wisdom would you give?
First, I wanted to take it back real quick because I was listening to you when you were talking about your mom and what you had said to me before. And I think I want to make it very clear, when it comes to like sons and their mothers, usually it's the mother's fault maybe of over-mothering and putting something on their son that shouldn't be. But that was never the case with his mom. She was never that way. But what I think it is you were already being formed into what a husband does and a father does, and that's to protect his woman, and she was your first woman. So it was like that was already in you, even before you met me, before you knew who I was. She was the first person you could cover, and that's why she was so important to you before I came around. And I never want you to feel guilty for saying that or feeling that way, that she came first. I think it's just because it was always in you to cover someone.
I appreciate that.
And I
Go
wanted to make sure
ahead and answer her
that was
question.
said.
You guys are so affirming. I love it.
I forget.
She just wants to make it. She's always she knows I'm not a sensitive person, but she always wants to like.
But that's
always,
very thoughtful and
Yeah,
affirming.
I don't want you to ever think.
No, I know. Answer a question. It can't be two people not answering the question. Let me do my job and take it every day.
No, but that's a part of the words of wisdom, because I know so many people, and Anja have talked about this, that in their marriages they struggle because they do feel like they're coming second, and they do feel like they're competing with the mother, and still haven't found their way out of that, to be honest. So that's a part of, I think, the wisdom.
Yeah.
Are we going to time restraint? Because I just want 2 more minutes. Because you cut me off about the sex part.
Hilarious.
No. Hear me on this. Because this is the thing. I was trying to go to a place. This is why. Because men, for relationships, marriage, we're talking about marriage because sex doesn't start in the bed. So what I mean by that is you can't be at work all day, go play the PS5, eat some nachos, and then just be like, you ready. You have to be able to touch your woman in ways where she doesn't say, oh, he's touching me. That means he wants something.
Okay.
You have to be able to be intimate with her, and that will allow for the intimacy. And I don't think a lot of men understand or grasp that. So then they just say, well, she's turning me down. She's turning you down because the only time you touch her, show any kind of affection, is when it's go time for you. And that's not how women work. That's not how it's not ideal for them. It's not ideal for you. It's not ideal for them because they want to feel like a piece of meat. And I talk about sex because it is extremely important.
And you, yes, my words of wisdom, right? First of all, continue praying for your spouse.
Yes.
For who they are, for what they are expected to be, for the burden that they carry, for who they're going to be in your later years. Pray for all of that. But one of the most important pieces of advice, I think, is be private sometimes. Only really bear it all out to maybe your spiritual mothers, spiritual fathers, and people who have your best interest at heart, because not everybody does. And, whatever you guys go through in your relationship is not anybody's business, not everybody's business, except the people who are covering you spiritually. And I think that's really important when you allow other people into your relationship who really have no business being there. And one of the easiest ways people do that now is airing everything online.
Social media.
And now you have comments pouring in about how you're supposed to think or feel and run your household when they're only seeing a little snippet. And, especially now, and especially the younger generations growing up, online is all they know. And there's no longer any privacy and no longer a standard of what is in the house should probably stay in the house. Not everything has to be public knowledge.
Would you speak to something? Would you speak to the importance of the spiritual covering that you feel is maybe important in a marriage? You were saying like mentors or things of that nature, perhaps pastors.
Can I say something real quick? There are so many people who want your relationship to fail that don't know they do.
That is true.
No. There are friends that people have that subconsciously don't know it, but they would be so happy if your marriage ends because then they get the time they used to have with you.
Yeah, I can.
And they don't even know it. There's relatives, all that. Because you got to think about it. Not everybody's operating under the kingdom. And that's why I have to share. Thank you for bringing it up. Because we always tell people, if you are going to talk about the inner workings of your marriage, you got to make sure you're doing it with people who's going to pray for you, not people who's going to be adding gas to the fire.
Correct.
Because there are even people who are in competition with you that don't even realize it. And if you tell them something, and these are people who are not under the kingdom, they are not looking at things from a spiritual aspect. They're looking from a straight aspect of, oh, okay, so if they start bickering, now I can say my relationship's better than them. There are people operating in different atmospheres than where you are. Yeah. And if you don't share this stuff with people who are of the kingdom, they will light a flame to your relationship, to your life, before you even understand what's going on. I'm sorry.
Powerful.
No, that's pretty much the gist of it. Ever since we were just boyfriend and girlfriend, we have always had older couples who poured into us, and we always gravitated toward them. They would spend time with us, take us to dinner, to the movies, and we were vastly younger than they were, and and probably the same age as their children, and we're friends with their children, but they took the time and they took the energy to pour into us, probably because they knew what marriage was going to be like. And now that if we have a hiccup, they're the first people, and sometimes the only people we call. And then immediately they start praying, and then immediately they start going to scripture and saying, that's not biblical, but this is, read this verse and meditate on this and worship about this and pray about this. And if you don't have that kind of covering, you're going to get confused real fast. even if they're people in church, even if they are people who know Christ, you have to have someone on a much more mature spiritual level than you to mentor you. And I know sometimes when people come to us for mentorship, we tell them straight up, we're not going to tell you what you want to hear, we're going to tell you what's biblical. So if you're not cool with that, we can't help you. Because we have to keep it biblical. And you have to keep biblical people in your life to help you grow.
Because God's advice is always going to beat ours.
Boom.
Yeah.
Yes. And that is a wonderful place to conclude this very hot conversation that we've had today. We thank you, Parkers, for coming in today and pouring your wisdom and also your process with our guests, because the journey doesn't end. It is ongoing. And I think it's so beautiful for how you guys are cultivating, and not just your marriage, but your family and everybody who's called to your voice, who's called to see you guys. It's so important to stay strong in that, in the biblical foundation that you guys have, as we just watch it bloom and grow for the kingdom. I think it's gorgeous. So I am Anja, and my co-host is
Nicole.
And we want to say, make sure you guys stay in love with love, okay? Until next time.
Stay in love with love. Bye.